Hello, everyone. This is Michael E. Gordon with you here today to discuss printing with Adobe Photoshop in Windows. And I'm here on Windows 11, and we're looking at Photoshop version 25.6.0 or so. It is the very latest version of Photoshop, and it's May 2024. All right, so I've got an image up here on the screen. This is as it came out of the camera. I've done some color adjustments to it and so forth, color contrast. I'm going to assume it is ready to print. I have done no resizing of this, so this is the same resolution as it came out of the camera. So the first thing we need to do when we have a print ready file, first thing we need to do in Photoshop is to resize it to get it ready for the output size we intend to make. My preferred speedy method to reach the print window dialog is Control P, which on a Mac would be Command P, or you can go up here to the File menu and select File Print down here near the bottom. But shortcuts are a huge time saver, and I'm a fan. So this is how we get to the print dialog, is using Control P. We'll say done for now. And what I'm going to do is first resize this image, and I will do that by doing Control Alt I, which on a Mac is Command Alt I. And you can also do that by going to Image Size, and that's here, Image Size. And note the shortcut is Alt Control I. My preference is always to use keyboard shortcuts. All right, so these are the specs of the file as it came out of the camera, or at least as it came out of the camera with layers now baked into it, adjustment layers. So we have an image size of 260 megabytes, which would result in a print at roughly 27.5 inches by 18.5 inches at 300 pixels per inch. And the first thing we should do is talk about pixels per inch versus dots per inch, because we're discussing two different mediums here. And one is the display that we're working on, which utilizes pixels, versus the paper and printer, which we will output to, which utilizes dots. And in general practice, you want your output resolution here to match the output resolution that you intend to print with. Epson printers in particular want divisibles of 360 dots per inch. That's ordinarily the best print you can get from an Epson printer. When we cram 360 dots of ink into an inch, which would mean I would want to change this resolution number to 360 dots per inch, pixels per inch to get this to match. And let's say I want this to be a 24-inch wide print by 16 inches tall. At 360 pixels per inch, this tells me that there will be some bloat, about 25 megapixels, 25 megapixels, megabytes larger this file will become, meaning there is some interpolation when we choose 360 pixels per inch at 24 by 16. I bet if I change this value to 23 inches, there we go, I get it much closer to in versus out. So this means basically there would be no interpolation, or almost none, at 23 by 15.3 inches. So interpolation is something we need to consider anytime we're resizing for print. If I were to make this a smaller size, like this, for instance, 20 inches wide by 13.33, we can see I still have plenty of resolution left over here. So there's no interpolation. I'm coming in at 260, but only need just shy of 198 megabytes to make this print at 20 inches by 13.33. The next thing we want to discuss is this resample field. And the choice you will make here will be dependent upon what exactly is going to happen. If there will be some interpolation like we just discussed, then you'd likely want to choose one of these enlargement possibilities. If you're down resing like we're doing here, then you would choose probably bicubic sharper. Automatic you can always get away with in Photoshop, but if you want to be in control here, then you can actually select the method that you want and see what it does for you. And as with everything, I always recommend that you compare the differences between these for yourself so that you can see exactly what happens. Let's assume that I'm going to go ahead and make this print 20 inches by 13.33 tall at 360 pixels, or rather dots per inch when it comes out of the printer. And we already defined that this is going to be reduction, not enlargement, because I have no loss of resolution here. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and choose bicubic sharper reduction, because that's actually what I'm doing here. All right. So now I will be resizing this to 20 inches by 13.33, and you can see it just refixed its position. And if I look at the size, there it is, 20 by 13.333 at 360 pixels per inch. And I chose again bicubic sharper. At this point, this is where we would want to apply sharpening. And if I get up close and look at this thing, it does look pretty sharp, but nonetheless, this is the point at which you want to apply sharpening. And sharpening is always relative to output. So don't sharpen your files on input, or rather maybe do a very moderate amount of input sharpening and leave all of your sharpening to the very last step before you output. And that's the example here. So here's where I would add sharpening, but we don't need to do that today. So I've got this thing resized. So now I'm going to launch the Adobe Photoshop print dialog, which again is Control or Command P. And it's a good idea to step through this dialog from the top down. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we choose the appropriate printer. And in this case, I do want to output to my Epson Stylus Pro 9890, which is a 44-inch wide printer. And I'll now go into my print settings, and notice what this launched was the Epson print dialog. So anytime we're printing, it's a two-part process. We need to make sure that we have the Photoshop dialog set up properly, and we need to make sure that we have the Epson, Canon, or whatever other dialog set up properly. So in this driver, the Epson driver, we're going to go ahead and set up my settings for this. And let's say I want to output this on Moab Juniper Baryta. And if we look, we can see I have a preset there for it. I have made these presets and saved these for myself for easy use on any future print. So I'm going to go ahead and grab Moab Juniper Baryta RGB. It automatically changes the media type, color, and quality to the settings that I chose when I clicked Save, Delete. And you'll notice this is how we save these settings for future use. We can save any amount of parameters in here and then hit Save and then name it appropriately at the very last stage. And since this is going to be a color print, I want to make sure it's on color output. And print quality, let's talk about Epson here real quick. If we were to choose Epson speed, this will be the fastest print method, but it will also use the least amount of dots to print that print. So be about 120 dots per inch. If we choose quality, that's going to tell the Epson printer to lay down about 240 dots per inch. And should I choose max quality, that's going to tell the printer to lay down about 360 dots per inch. And if you recall, I told the file size coming out of Photoshop to be 360 pixels per inch because I wanted to output at 360 to the printer. So in this case, I'll go ahead and choose max quality. And max quality will always result in the highest output quality, but will also use more ink and take longer to print. And if we look over here at print quality to the left, you'll notice it's using the highest resolution available to that printer, 2880 by 1440 dots per inch. All right, so we've got the paper parameter set up, color, print quality set up. Now we want to take a look at the mode, and we never want to use anything that says automatic, right? Because we're professionals. So we want to be in charge of things. So we want to choose custom. And then under the custom drop down, these are our options. We always want to, when we are color managing using Photoshop, we don't want anything here but no color adjustment. We're telling the Epson driver, no thank you. We want to manage color from Photoshop. So this should always be off, no color adjustment. Next thing we'll do is come down here to paper source and size. And I'm going to go ahead and choose roll paper because this is a 44-inch wide printer. I'm going to chop this smaller print off of a 44-inch wide piece of paper. And I want it to be automatically cut by the printer. So make sure if you want your printer to auto cut, if you're using a roll printer, make sure that auto cut is selected. So now I have auto cut selected. And next I'm going to go into size. If you're using sheets, you have your presets for sheets, as we can see here. If I'm using a roll, then I want to choose user defined, and I'm going to go ahead and plug in my parameters here. So paper width 44 inches, and if you'll recall, we made this print 13.333 inches tall. So why don't I go ahead and tell this to be 15 inches tall. That'll give me about 3/4 of an inch top and bottom for border on this print. Okay. I always like to make sure print preview is checked because this is a last stop for me to make sure that I didn't make any errors in my process. So make sure print preview is checked. And ordinarily you can just disregard the tabs for paper layout and utility. We're controlling these from Photoshop. So we'll say okay here. Now notice that this window just slightly resized because we told the paper what size it needs to be. So we got the whole printer set up, dialed in up here. Next, we're going to take a look at color management. And again, we are managing the color here. So we're going to choose Photoshop manages color. And at this point is where we would choose our printer profile. And I am going to choose my custom printer profile for Moab Juniper Baryta. And then we need to talk about rendering intent. As photographers, there are two rendering intents here that are going to be of use to us, and this will be either perceptual or relative colorimetric. If you've worked with labs before, you're probably familiar with them telling you to set or send them a file using the perceptual rendering intent. Personally, I like relative colorimetric. It's more respectful of my original colors coming out of the camera. It doesn't compress or squash color or saturate color the way that perceptual does. But this is not a video about rendering intents, so I'd encourage you to read up on rendering intents so that you understand what rendering intents do. So I will choose relative colorimetric here, and almost all the time, I'll just tell you 100% of the time, leave your black point compensation checked. You always want that to be on. We'll skip the description field, and now we'll take a look at position and size. Again, I have a 44-inch wide sheet here. I don't want to make a 20-inch wide print right in the middle of the sheet. So I'm going to uncheck center. And over here in the left field, you'll notice it's just shy of 12 inches off the left edge of the paper. And instead, I want to go ahead and give it, let's just call it a 0.7-inch margin to match roughly what I gave it on the top and bottom. So now notice how I move the image over to the left side of the paper, and I'll just chop it off on the right. But if I wanted to, I could use these printing marks here. I could select any one of these for inclusion on the print. I don't use them. You may wish to. And this is about all. Whoops, sorry about that. You want to make sure scale is never changed. So we want to leave that at 100. So this is about all we need to do in the Adobe Photoshop print dialog. So we've got our Epson printer set up properly. We've got the paper size scaled to the print size. We're using the proper profile. I've chosen the correct rendering intent, and I've positioned the print on the paper where I want it. And that will lead me next to say print. And this will give me the print preview that I recommended to you. And I would suggest that you never use this print preview as an actual gauge of what your print will look like, because you can see that this has no relation to what's on the screen behind it. But this is a useful guide to tell me if I've done anything else wrong. I can see I'm getting the full image. It's sitting on the paper where I want. If it goes full bleed or pushes against the edge, or I don't have the whole image, it tells me I did something wrong in the process. And in that case, I would hit cancel. Since this print is ready to go, I would just go ahead and hit print at this point to send it off to the printer. And I'm not actually doing that. That concludes printing using Photoshop. If you have any questions about this process, please feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, or feel free to send me a private email and I will respond to it. If you would like to talk about and learn about processing and printing, I encourage you to look at my workshops page and take a look at my Artful Process and Print workshop with Chuck Kimmerle. Our next edition comes up in January 2025. We would love to work with you. I hope this helps you understand the Photoshop print dialogue, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks for watching.